We've got a solid foundation on the basics of working with the Final Cut timeline. I'd now like to take an opportunity to expand upon some of the important navigation techniques that will streamline your experience even more. I'm going to open up the 3.8 project, and this is actually a finished version of our Project Reload sequence. We obviously haven't gotten this far in adding our music, color correction, and other finishing touches, but we will get there in the coming chapters. I'm just using it now because it helps me demonstrate some of these concepts. So the first thing that I want to expand upon is skimming. We already know that we have general skimming enabled, which allows me to see the visual output of whatever I'm skimming over in my viewer, and that's this on-screen command here, keyboard shortcut S. We know that audio skimming allows me to hear my audio content as I skim over clips. What we haven't talked about yet is clip skimming. So I'm going to come up to the View menu, and you see that clip skimming is enabled. That's Option Command S. And clip skimming allows me to do a few things, but mainly it allows me to skim specific clips no matter where they're located on the timeline. So let's take a look at this. With clip skimming enabled, when I skim over my clips, I am seeing the visual output of whatever my mouse is over. So right now, even though I have B-roll over this section of Christian, I'm seeing Christian because that's where my mouse is. I move up and I see the B-roll. So no matter where you're at, that's what you're seeing. If you disable clip skimming, Option Command S, notice that now, without clip skimming enabled, you only see the visual output for the uppermost clips. And I want to mention one more thing about clip skimming. If I have general skimming off, but I have clip skimming on, notice that when I bring my mouse through the timeline, skimming is not enabled, but the moment I am right over a clip, I have skimming capabilities. So clip skimming never leaves us, even when skimming is off. I'll go ahead and turn general skimming back on. Now, I also want to talk about this button here, which we skipped over earlier. It's the solo button, and that allows you to isolate your clips. So I'll go ahead and zoom in here, Command++. If I select Christian's clip here, and then I solo it, keyboard shortcut Option S, notice that it's in color, everything else is in gray. As I play over it, I'm only going to hear this clip.
You will see organically people that will step up and demonstrate great selflessness, great esprit, great teamwork, and great leadership.
So here I soloed one clip. You can actually solo as many clips as you like. If I wanted to solo this entire section here, I could click and then shift click and then press Option S, and I'm soloing those clips. Now, one more thing I want to point out. Notice that solo is really only a function of audio. So here, even though my Christian clip is soloed, I'll go ahead and just solo that one again, select it and Option S. And if I play over this, I don't hear my music, I just hear Christian.
Up and demonstrate great selflessness.
But I'm actually seeing my B-roll. If I would really like to hone in and only see this clip, then I would disable these clips. And the way you do that is to select them, and then you can right-click and choose Disable, but you should really learn the keyboard shortcut V for this. So if I press V, notice that these are now disabled and I'm seeing Christian. And then if I press V again, I see my B-roll. You can disable any type of clip, video or audio. And often, when you're playing through and checking out something in solo mode particularly, you'll want to continue to loop over it again and again to see how it's working. To do that, you just need to enable loop playback mode. Again, that's in View, Playback, Loop Playback, or Command L. And then the command is play around, which is Shift ? So if I want to see how this particular edit is working, I'll go ahead and solo both of those. Click and Command click and Option S. And I'll put my playhead right there. And I'll press Shift ? and it will begin looping.
Example is so important. You will see organically people. Example is so important. You will see organically.
So playing around a specific moment in your timeline is something you'll do a lot. So remember that, Shift ? to play around. I'll go ahead and unsolo these clips for now, Option S. Now I want to review zooming for a moment. We know that to zoom in, I press Command+ repeatedly. To zoom out, we press Command- repeatedly. To zoom to fit or fit the sequence within the timeline view, that's Shift-Z. But let me zoom in again, Command++. When you're zoomed in and you just want to move downstream, you can enable the hand tool, which you can find in this menu here, keyboard shortcut H. So I'm just going to press H, and you can sort of drag down, and maybe this is what I'm looking for. And then again, whenever you change your tool, always make sure to change it back to the select tool. So I'll just press A. Let me go back where I was. I'm just going to enable hand tool, drag it down, back to A, and it's as easy as that. Now let's talk about in and out ranges. We learned earlier that to play a specific range, it's the / key. So let me pick a range here. I'll go ahead and mark an in here and an out here, and I'll press /.
Because you really only know leadership when you see it, and that's why leadership by example is so important. You will see organically people that will step up because you really only...
And again, that loops because I have loop playback on. Now, speaking of selecting a range, so far we've only dealt with in and out points. Again, you sort of hover to mark an in, you hover to mark an out, and you've marked your range. Now, a lot of people click and sort of mess that up. They'll click here and mark an in, no problem. Then they'll click here and mark an out, and they've lost their in point. So be aware of that. In and out point setting in the timeline is kind of a hovering activity, not a clicking activity. If you just want to enable a tool that allows you to sort of click and drag through a range, that's available to you. Under this menu, you have the Range Selection tool, or R. So I know a lot of editors who use this a lot. They'll go ahead and say, all right, I just want to set a range, so I'm just going to press R and drag over this area, and I've set a range. And there are many reasons in Final Cut why you would want to set ranges, so just keep that in your back pocket as well. And as always, just make sure to go back to Select Tool A when you're finished. Next up, I want to come to this arrow right here. This is the Timeline History button, which allows me to access projects that I've previously loaded. So if I click on this left arrow, it loads the previous sequence that I was working on, and again, and so on. And of course, once you've gone back, you can also go forward. So here's the Go Forward in Timeline History button. Keyboard shortcuts for this are Command left bracket to go back in time and Command right bracket to go forward. Now finally, I want to talk about workspaces. There are several workspaces that come with the program by default. So far, we've really only been in the default editing view, but there are also some other workspaces that are good for other phases of the editing process. If I come up to Window, Workspaces, I can change to Organize, and this is really great for organizing my assets. It gets rid of the timeline since I'm not editing, it expands my browser, and it also opens up the inspector. I can also go to Color and Effects, and so when I'm doing color correction and visual effects work, I have opened the appropriate windows. Also, if I have multiple displays, I'd have my dual displays option too, which sends some windows over to the left monitor and some over to the right. Within all of this is a very useful feature to be able to set up my own custom workspace and remember different layouts. So let me go back to default, and I'm going to rearrange my windows a bit. I'm going to close my inspector. I'm also going to close my browser. And so let's say that I want this view that features only the timeline and the viewer. So I'm just in the heart of editing. I don't need to organize anything. I don't need to inspect anything. Let's save this out. So I'm going to come to Window, Workspaces, and Save Workspace As, and I'll just call this Timeline. And now I can go back and forth between my various workspaces, including my custom workspace. Now, if you make a change to this, let's say I'll just rearrange the sizes of the timeline and viewer, you can update that by choosing Update Timeline Workspace, and now this is my timeline workspace. Keep in mind these options are not only for a single monitor setup, they're also if I want to set up custom layouts for different screen sizes and multiple monitors. So sometimes if you're editing on a laptop and sometimes you edit on a giant dual monitor setup, you can make different custom workspaces for each of those. So I'll go back to my default workspace, keyboard shortcut Command-0, by the way, which is good to memorize. And I like this for now, but I'll go ahead and close my inspector for the time being. So those are some good tips and techniques for further viewing and navigation methods. They will help you play and navigate a bit better through your projects and make you a faster and more efficient editor.